The valleys of South Wales, now unrecognisable from the stereotypical image of the area that encapsulated its former life as an industrial hub. The villages hereabouts were built on coal, a mineral wealth which brought riches for some and employment for many. There was pride and community spirit. Mining's demise did wonders for the landscape, erasing its blackened scars, but the social and economic wounds have been slower to heal. The loss of rail links built originally to serve the pits didn't help. Rhondda Tunnel connected Blaencwm to Blaengwynfi, 2 miles on the train but 11 via a mountain pass that's glorious in the summer but winter weather can make treacherous. The tunnel was closed in 1968 and buried a decade or so later. Could its reopening for walkers and cyclists improve connectivity, boost tourism and create jobs? It's an idea promoted by a campaign group, the Rhondda Tunnel Society, based locally but with far-reaching support. It has big ambitions.
There's going to be an information centre, possibly a cafe or a restaurant. There's going to be bike hire. There's going to be disabled buggies. There's going to be a bus running across the Ricos. There's going to be car parks. So this is going to show this place for what it is. Little Switzerland, as Richard Burton said.
You'll also see probably quite a few more B&Bs springing up in Blaengwynfi and on the other side in Blaencwm. The shops will reopen, pubs will reopen, restaurants reopen. This is what we want to see. Put a bit of life back into the communities.
Whilst the tunnel's reopening has many champions, there are substantial hurdles to overcome. Who would own it, and what condition is it in after 50 years redundancy? The most likely custodians are the Welsh Government or 2 local authorities, but they won't make commitments without clear insight into the extent of the liabilities, the repairs needed and their likely cost. That's why engineers from Balfour Beatty have spent 6 days in the tunnel, carrying out a tactile examination of its lining.
We look for, firstly, the obvious losses of section, what we engineers call spalling, which is pieces of masonry or brickwork that is broken away, usually through either movement within the barrel itself or through freeze-thaw action. And then the listening part of that would be to ensure the soundness of the masonry and brickwork. So we have large pieces of metal that we hit things with, very simplistically, and if it bounces off, it's very good. If it makes a dull thud, you might be slightly worried. If it sounds like a drum, there is definitely some separation.
Rhondda Tunnel was driven in the late 1880s, its construction beset by delay and contractual wrangle. 130 years later, most of it still appears in good condition, although mine workings and water ingress prompted defects to emerge through the eastern half of the tunnel, steel ribs then being inserted to provide additional support. Some sections were originally so flawless that the engineer left them unlined, only for the Board of Trade inspector to voice his objections. Concrete and brickwork soon brought his approval. And then there's the cog, a timber construction occupying the full profile of the tunnel at a point where a hinge has developed at the high haunch. Its role was to resist any further distortion of the lining, although there's no evidence it ever did so. No part of it actually makes contact with the stonework, which is just as well. Some of the timber today is hollow and rotten.
I've walked 2 miles from one end of this tunnel to the other. I've seen examples of Victorian engineering, very high quality work, innovation. This must be one of the very earliest tunnels with concrete. I've seen a tunnel in extremely good condition. Yes, there's a few defects. Yes, there's some areas where there's going to be some masonry repairs, the steel arches are in there, and there's some water ingress. But there's nothing that I would see here that can't be solved.
That said, restoring Rhondda Tunnel for public use will not be cheap. There's much to do both inside and out. But the Society is clear the benefits will outweigh the costs, and it's developing a business case to prove it. The big question is whether those in authority can see the vision and have the courage to support it.
Looking at the long-term plan, a few years from now, this could become a real hotspot for tourism, and actually that'll benefit the wider valleys. So I think if you just think of how unique this is, and the selling attraction for the area, I think it's something that we should definitely be backing.
Come on now, Chris, don't be shy.
There'll be a verdict on whether to back it after the engineering and financial evidence has been collated and considered. But if first impressions count, there is certainly cause for optimism.